All right, welcome to another episode of this tutorial. All right, so today we'll be creating another set of components. We'll be doing our hero section component today, and this is the design we're going to be following. Now, so we've done this is our navbar 2, that's what we have here, and that was what I explained in the last tutorial before this one. So we're going to be doing these components, this hero section component. So in our page, after the navbar 2, we're going to have another component just after this navbar. Alright, so we're going to be doing this today, and we're also going to be doing this. We're going to be doing this. So we're going to be doing two hero section. We're going to be doing this one, and then we're going to be doing this one. In a minute. All right, so let's call this one hero section 1 or hero 1. Then we'll do this hero 2. I'm going to be sending you this image. I'm just going to post it on the group so that we'll use it. So let me just delete this one for now and let us stay with this. So excuse me. To do this is very simple, really. We are going to be having a wrapper div, like a container div, like a div that that will house all these contents, right? So inside this div, we'll have another div that will house just this content alone, right? Now, so we'll have a div, right? A div that will house, sorry, sorry about that. So we'll have a div, right? That will house this section, right? Then inside this section, we'll have a div that will house all these contents. Then inside that div, we'll have a div for this, right? We also have another div for this section, for this content, sorry. We'll have another div that will house this button. Then a last div that will house this scroll to learn more. So let me take that again. A div for the section, right? Then another div that will house this content. Then inside that div we'll have four divs. The div that will house this startup framework, and another div, right, that will house this one. Then another div that will house this button. Then the last div that will have this scroll to learn more. So let's head right into our code. Right, so this was where we left off the last video. So I'm just going to create another component. Inside my component folder, I'll call that hero1, hero1. I'm going to call it herosection1. And inside it, I'm going to have a file. I'll call it herosection1.jsx. And then I'm going to have my style.css, right? So inside my hero section 1, I'm going to do sfc and call this hero. Don't forget, your function must always start with capital letter. Hero section 1. Then inside my return, I'm going to do a nameless tag. And then just like we said, I'm going to have a div, right? I'll call this one hero section 1, right? So inside this hero section 1, I'm going to have a div that will house all the contents. I'll say contents container. I'll make this S. content container. Then inside the content container, I'm going to have my very first div. I'll call it main text container, right? So inside that, I'll have a span. Normally we're supposed to use, I'm referring to this here, this text here. This is our main content or main text, sorry. Now, so normally I'm supposed to use h1 for this content, but I'm not going to use h1. I'm just going to use a span tag. Found out why. Really, don't find out why. It's because h1 tag many times has its own default styling that can kind of override, our own styling and make things a little bit complicated. So I'm just going to do my own. So I'm going to have a span, and that span, I'm going to give it a name of main texts. And inside this, instead of using startup framework, I'm just going to say build with Steeze. Okay, you know what? Let me do startup framework. Startup framework, right? So I'm going to have another div. I'm going to call it class subtext container. Subtext container. This is the subtext here. So this will be the subtext container, and this will be the subtext. So inside it, I'm going to have a span. I'll call it subtext, and I'll say I'm just going to copy all this here. It's the content here, so I'll copy it and paste it here. Close this one here. Right. So I'll have another div. I'll say btn cta btn container. Right. So it's a span. Sorry, not span. I'm going to be using a button. Say explore design. Then I'm going to have one last div for scroll more btn container, and then this is just going to be a button. Say scroll more. So I'm just going to copy scroll to learn. So I hope this is clear. So we have a div, right? This div here. This div here that house all our content. So it's just going to be like the section container. So we called it HeroSectionOne, right? This div. So inside this div, we have a single div, right? That house all our texts, right? We call that content container. Then we have a div that house this startup framework, another div for this one here, another div for the button, and another div for the scroll to learn. This should be very basic. Now notice something. This HeroSectionOne has only one element inside it, right? It has just this element inside it, right? Now, if I should say it the right way, or we call it the right word, or use the right word, we'll say it has only one content inside it, and that is content container. Now, this content container has three contents or four contents. This a content, 2, 3, 4. It has four contents inside it. Now, this div main text container has just one content inside it, and that is span, right? So I just need you to understand that, because we're going to be using that idea in styling our work. So the HeroSectionOne has just one content, which is content container. The content container has four contents, which is, these four divs that you have inside. So let's style our work. Now, before we style it, let us use this component in our page. So head to your app.js, and under your navbar 2, just import HeroSection1 here. And if we view it in our browser, you should have something like this. So you have startup framework, got a big idea, something like this. Right, so let's style it. Sorry, that's my HeroSection1. Yeah, I did it. So before styling, I'm just going to import my style. Steeze is inside the same folder, style.css, right? And inside my CSS, I'm just going to start with my styling, but let me split my screen so that you see what I'm doing. So here is section one, then here I have my style.css. So hero section one. And the first thing I want to do is to give you background color red so you see what I'm styling. Right, so this is the hero section one, right? A div that house all these contents. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the display to flex. I'm going to be using flexbox a lot. Now, if you don't see anything, the next thing I'll be doing is to say heights auto. Now, auto means the height of this div should respond to what is inside. So the more the content inside, the more height it will have. I could use auto or say max content. Is going to be the same thing. Max content means maximum content. Take the maximum height of the content that is inside. That means that the height of this div will be dependent on the content that is inside it. All right. So the next thing I want to do is to give it a little bit of padding, right? So padding, I'll say 40 px. Now, padding is basically space, right, around this div. Now, so 40 px padding means that is 40 px space here. From here to here is also 40 px. From here to here is also 40 px. Then there's a 40 px around this place. But let me just increase it to like say 50 px, not 500, 50 pixels. And but instead of using pixels, let's make it a little bit dynamic and responsive. Let's use realm instead of px. I'm just going to use 8 rem, right? And you have something like this. So 8 rem here, 8 rem here, 8 rem here, and 8 rem here, right? So the next thing I want to style is my content container. Just going to copy it. Now inside my HeroSection1, since the content container inside HeroSection1, I can also style content container inside HeroSection1 in my CSS. So the first thing I want to do is, don't mind all this auto completion, is because I have Git Copilot configured on my VS Code, so you shouldn't see something like this. So I'm going to change the display to flex, right? Now let me go back. First thing I want to do is give you background color so you see what I'm doing. Background color is white, right? So this is my content container. Now the second thing I want to change is the display. Now before I change display to flex, now the default display of div is block, right? And block level elements take 100% of the width of whatever they are inside, right? That's why everything is vertically arranged, right? Now you have startup. After startup, you have God's big idea under startup, and then you have this under this, you have this under this. That's because everything is block level elements. Now, and the what's it called now? The content container is also block level elements. So everything kind of stays, horizontally arranged. Now, if you change the display of this content container to flex, what will happen is that the content inside it will be horizontally arranged. Let's do it so we'll see what we're talking about. Display flex, and see that the content is now horizontally arranged. Everything is arranged horizontally, side by side, right? That's because we have changed the display to block from block to flex. Now, so to make everything vertically aligned again, what we can do is to say flex direction. Flex direction. Now, by default is row. Row means it will arrange all this content in a single row, right? Now, we want to change it from row to column, right? So it will arrange it in form of a column on just one straight column. So if you change it to column, you should have something like this. Simple. Now, the reason why we're using display flex is so that we can give, our content inside it a little bit of gap. So by changing display to flex and change the flex direction to column, we can now use gap and say, let's just use like one realm. And you see that it gaps the content. Framework, you know, this div has a little bit of space before this div, a little bit of space before this, a little bit of gap before this div, and we're done. So the next thing I want to do is to move this entire div to the center. And to do that, just head into your hero section one. Now don't forget that this hero section one has just one content, and that is content container, right? So we want to move this content container to the center of this hero section one, right? So we have to come into our hero section one and CSS and say justify contents center, and it's at the center, right? But notice something inside this content container, right? The text inside it are aligned to the left. We want it aligned to the center because we're following this design, right? And if you notice, everything is aligned to the center. The text inside it. So to do that, we'll come inside our content container and say text align. We'll say center. Right? Can you see that everything is now centered? This should be very clear. You shouldn't have any issues with this. Now, so the next thing we want to do is to style the content, the text themselves. Now, so don't forget that our main text container is inside our content container, so we can style in our CSS our main text container inside our content container, right? So inside this one, I'm going to have main text, right? Don't forget that main text is inside main text container. This should be very clear. So I'm just going to make the main text two realm, right? And change the font width to 600. The font width, let me show you what it does. Let me come in. Main text container. Okay, dot main text. Right? So you can see that it has increased. Now let me use 4 realm so it will be bigger. Okay, let me use 4.5. Let me use 5.5. All right, good. We're good to go. 5.5. And the font width, to make it a little bit bolder, I'm just going to do font width 600. Notice when you're using font width, you don't put pixels. If you put pixels, it will not work. So it's just 600, right? Let me use 650. Right? 600 is good, right? Now, so let's remove this background color from our, so you should have something like this, right? So let's style this one too. So to style that one, we'll say, let's just close this one up. Still inside our content container, we're going to style, we'll say, excuse me, dot subtext container. Then we'll have dot inside subtext container, we'll have dot subtext. And we'll say font size, just use one realm. subtext container. Okay, let me use 2 rem. 1 rem is fine. Nope, let me use 1.5. 1.5 is not bad, right? And I'll change the color. Okay, let me remove the background color red so you see why I'm changing the color. Alright, so it's now white, just as we have in our design. Right. So let's if you look at this design, the color is kind of faded. So let's change our color to a little bit of faded color. So color is just going to be ash 555. And then it's now faded. Okay, let me increase it a little bit to 1.6 rem. Alright. Okay, 1.7. Okay, it's not bad. 1.7. Then here, increase the font width to like 650. Better. Better. So let's style our button. So I'll say CTA BTN container. And notice we want to move the button down a little bit because in our design the button is like down a little bit. We could have just increased the gap, but the gap will also affect because I like this distance. Okay, let's just increase the gap. Let's just say 1.5. Okay, but if you see the button is still we still have the same gap here, right? The gap we have here is same gap we have here. So let's increase this, in, push this down a little bit. I mean, this button, let's push it down a little bit. So we'll say, just going to close this up. So I'll say CTA container. This CTA container here is what I'm styling here. I'll just say margin top. Now margin top push a content down. I'll say maybe 2%. Let's see whether it moves down. Can you see that it moves down a little bit? 2%. Don't forget I'm using percent for my margin top. Find out why I'm using percent. Right, so inside it I'll have button. I can just style the button inside it and say button. Since I'm styling the button element, I don't need to do dot button, right? So I'll just say background not background color. I'll say border onset. I'll say background color. We're using a bluish kind of color, so let me get the color from my navbar 2. Should be inside my CSS. So this is the color we're using here. I'm just going to add back inside this place and say this color. So you should see it. So let's give it a little bit of padding. We'll say padding. I'm just going to use 30px. Right, 30px is too much. Okay, I'll say now don't forget that this 30px will apply on all the sides. 30 here, 30 here, 30 top, 30 bottom. So what I want to do is to reduce the top and bottom space to 10. So I can just say 10px. So 10px in front will apply to top and bottom, right? And 30px will apply to left and right. So that 10px is too small. I'll just say 20. All right, this is good. I'll give it a little bit of border radius. Border radius. I'll say 10px. Now it's always good for your border radius to align with this one. It should be the same as what you are having in your CTA. So I think in our CTA we are using 5px inside the nav, right? The border radius here should be the same as the border radius here. So in this place we're using 5. This place too should be 5. All right. So after that we'll change the color to white, right? And then let's increase the font width. So let's font size. Let's give it size to maybe 1.2 rem. Right, good. And then let's leave the font width like that. Let's see our design again. Okay. Let's reduce the padding to like 15. The padding top and bottom to like 15. All right, good. This is good. This is good. All right. So what we're left to do now is this scroll to learn BTN. So I'm just going to copy the class name. That scroll to learn too, we're going to push it down a little bit. Say dot scroll to learn container, we'll say margin top. Let's just use like 4%. Let's see. Let's move down a little bit. And then we're going to style the button inside. I'll say border on set. Background color is going to be white. It should look something like this. And then I'm going to increase, let me see, I'm coming. Scroll to learn more. That's the content inside. Scroll to learn more. So I'm just going to say color. I'm also going to use hash 555. Now increase the font size to like 1.2 realm. 1.0 realm might be too big. Let's do 1.1. Right? So we're done. Let's just do one realm. One realm, we're done. Now let's give it a little bit of padding so that we don't have to click on the letter before it takes effect. Let's put some space around. So I'm just going to do padding. Let's just do say 5 pixels. That's all. So we're done with our hero section one. So one thing I want to do again is I want to give increase this text here and probably increase this, these links here. So head back inside your navbar one, the CSS. I say now notice I've changed my padding here in navbar 2 from 30 px to top 30 top bottom and 100 left right, so you can update your code here. And I've removed the box shadow. If I put the box shadow, you should have something like this, but let's remove the box shadow so you can align with our design, right? Excuse me. So what I want to do is to the logo. Where's my navbar 2? So the logo container, right? I'm going to start the logo container in my navbar 2.css. Just going to put it here, say logo container, then increase the font size to say 2 realm, right? So it has increased. Let me reduce it a little bit. Let's just do 1.5 realm. All right, so this is good. So recreate this, in your repo, sorry, in your project, and be ready to present this evening. And you're ready to explain how you did this design this evening. So in our next class, we'll be doing this as our hero section 2. Once we are done with this, we are going to have something like this. We're going to have something like this. Just after our hero section 1, we'll have this. What is it again? Yeah, we'll have this, right? We'll have this. So we'll do hero section 1, hero section 2, right? Then after this, we'll have this. We're creating a full website, really. So create your hero section 1 component. Then the next class we'll look at how to do our hero section 2. Do have yourselves a wonderful day. If you have any question, let's discuss it in the class. Bye.